Well, it was a little confusing, Wolf, to be honest. First of all, I don't think this is a huge breakthrough in the sense that, as Dr. Hahn mentioned, this convalescent plasma has been available. It's been used in over 70,000 people already under these expanded access programs. So it is a therapy that is out there and, correctly as mentioned, has been used to treat other infectious diseases. The confusing part a little bit, Wolf, is that, as you know, just a couple days ago, the FDA sort of put the brakes on an emergency use authorization. They were looking at the same data, I think, that a lot of people have been looking at, data that came out of the Mayo Clinic. And the concerning thing was that there wasn't a lot of what's called randomized trials, right? You put some people in one group and they get the medication, another group of people, similar people, don't get the medication, and you compare them to make sure, in fact, it's the convalescent plasma that is helping. If you don't randomize control like that, then you don't know. Could it be something else? Could it be another medication that's helping? We still don't have that data. I think what confused me, Wolf, a couple days ago, they said put the brakes on it. Today they're saying full steam ahead with this emergency use authorization. I don't know what changed. I talked to sources on the task force who say they haven't seen any new data. So what inspired this significant change within a couple of days in terms of going from no emergency use authorization to absolutely going forward on a Sunday night? That was the confusing part. They did explain what it is, how it might work, but we need that data, Wolf.
And it was interesting because earlier in the week, I think last Wednesday or so, the New York Times was reporting, Sanjay, and I'm sure you read the article I did, and I've got it right here, that experts from the coronavirus task force, including Dr. Francis Collins, the head of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Clifford Lane of NIH also, they stepped in to argue, because there was this debate going on at the FDA, they stepped in to argue that the emerging data on the treatment was simply too weak to go forward with this announcement. And now all of a sudden the president and Alex Azar and Dr. Stephen Hahn, they're going forward with it. So that's raising questions. And further raising questions is the tweet the president just posted yesterday. And let me read it to our viewers once again, because it's very disturbing what the president said about the Food and Drug Administration. He said this: the deep state, or whoever, over at the FDA is making it very difficult for drug companies to get people in order to test the vaccines and therapeutics. Obviously, they are hoping to delay the answer until after November 3rd. That's the presidential election. Must focus on speed and saving lives. And then the president tagged Dr. Stephen Hahn at Steve FDA. So it's raising all sorts of questions about the potential political impact of this decision just announced by the president.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, Wolf. I mean, that's the thing I think as medical reporters we're trying to sort of grapple with. We're trying to look at this evidence and say, okay, well, here is the evidence that you were looking at, as you point out, just a few days ago. Now it's Sunday night. Was there new evidence that was submitted? See, the thing is that, Wolf, there is what are called observational studies. Tens of thousands of people have used this, and they sort of observe this to say, hey, look, yeah, these people over here, if they get it within 3 days, if they're not on a ventilator, they're under the age of 80, they seem to be doing better. That's the observational data. But that's not the sort of data that is typically the standard by which you make these authorizations. You want to have some evidence that it's actually working because you randomize patients. You know, it wasn't that they also got steroids. It wasn't that they also got another treatment. You want to make sure that it was the convalescent plasma itself that's working. I don't know if there was new data that was submitted. I can tell you again, Wolf, talking to sources close to the task force, they didn't see any new data. You mentioned Dr. Collins, Dr. Fauci. I don't know that anybody else in the task force saw any of this new data just over the last few days. I should also point out this, Wolf, and this is a bit of a nuanced point, but once you issue the emergency use authorization, it's going to make it more challenging to actually do these randomized trials. Why? Because everybody then obviously wants this plasma. So how do you then stratify people into groups saying you're going to get it, you're not going to get it? That makes it challenging to actually collect the data to go forward with an actual approval. So, you know, it's going to be in this sort of gray area now, Wolf, with still no clear evidence that it actually works.
So basically, the bottom line is this is not a huge breakthrough. It's sort of promising in the sense that they've been testing this. They don't have a lot of data to confirm that it's a huge breakthrough. So we shouldn't necessarily accept the words of the president that this is they're going to cure a lot of people who are hospitalized for COVID-19 right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is that there's tens of thousands of people who've already gotten it, right? So first you say, well, now we got an authorization. Now people can go out and get it. Well, truth is, they could have already gone out and received this. There's been tens of thousands of people, I think over 70,000 people, Dr. Hahn mentioned, that have already received it. So in that sense, this EUA, this emergency use authorization, doesn't suddenly make something available to people that wasn't already available. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is, okay, do we have evidence that it works? And you heard, based on observational data, that people who are under the age of 80 that received this quickly within 3 days, seem to have decrease in mortality, 35% decrease in mortality. That sounds very promising, certainly, but that's not the sort of data upon which the FDA typically relies. They want to know, yes, it's good that 35% of the people, they had a reduction in mortality, but was it the plasma that did that? Or was it something else? I mean, this is a basic question in medical science. Wolf, I mean, everybody wants to be hopeful about these things. I mean, no one more than me. But, the idea that you have to prove that it works so that people aren't, making their bets on something that ultimately doesn't turn out to work, or they're taking their eyes off the ball on something that could potentially be much more beneficial. That's the issue here. So this is a confusing story that's emerging, Wolf. We don't have the data. A week ago, a few days ago, there wasn't the data. The FDA said, not ready, put the brakes on it. A few days later, all of a sudden, presumably looking at the same data, they're saying, move forward with an EUA, which is going to make it harder to collect data. And it's not going to do anything to actually make this available to more people because it already was available to tens of thousands of people.
The EUA, the emergency use authorization. So just to be precise, Sanjay, this has not been approved. This is just basically they're going ahead with more testing of this convalescent plasma to see if it works. They've got to do a lot more testing. And Dr. Hahn of the FDA himself said, I'm looking at my notes, this is not the same as approval. We are still collecting data. So when the president says this has nothing to do with politics, this is life or death, what's your reaction to that?
Well, it is one of these things where, Dr. Hahn is well within his right. The FDA is well within their right to issue an emergency use authorization. As you know, and as Dr. Hahn mentioned, they've done it for other things. They did it for hydroxychloroquine. As you know, they subsequently rescinded that emergency use authorization. They've done it for other therapeutics. They've done it for various types of tests, coronavirus tests. I think that the idea that you could say, I guess the question is this, Wolf. Can you say for sure right now that this stuff works? I mean, there's a lot of promise around it. It's encouraging because of how it's behaved with other diseases, so that's why you study it. You got a lot of reasons to study it. I mean, that much is true. But then you want to get the results of those studies to be able to make definitive statements like some of the ones you just heard. I don't think you can say the things definitively. People are going to take away this stuff, it cuts down mortality by 35%. I wish I could say that definitively, but I don't think you can right now because that data, at least I haven't seen it. The people on the coronavirus task force haven't seen it. So maybe the FDA is looking at new data that just came in over the last 24, 48 hours, perhaps, and that would be great. But keep in mind as well, Wolf, once you issue the EUA, it becomes harder to collect data. It becomes harder to randomize people. Who's going to say, hey, look, I want to go to a trial if I can just go ahead and get this stuff, and I heard that it saves 35% of people who take it. Who's going to say I'd rather just be, potentially be in the placebo group? Nobody would say that, right, Wolf? That makes it harder to actually collect the data that is needed to get to that approval. I know this is nuanced. There's a lot baked into that, but this is hugely important, Wolf. What is happening is hugely important because this is going to come up again and again over the next few weeks and months, especially with regard to a vaccine. What is going to be the bar at which these emergency use authorizations are granted, and are they going to be adequate?
Because they did say, Secretary Azar, that this convalescent plasma treatment now joins remdesivir and steroids. Remdesivir and steroids, they are considered much more effective in dealing with this, at least for now. Is that hydroxychloroquine was approved for emergency use, but then it was rescinded by the FDA, much to the president's dislike.
Right. So the way to, I think, sort of characterize this is that the quality of evidence around dexamethasone and remdesivir is a much higher quality of evidence. Those are randomized prospective controlled trials, meaning that they said we're going to start this study and we're going to look going forward, as opposed to looking at data backwards. We're going to truly randomize people. Either you're going to get the placebo or you're going to get the therapy. People don't know